Robert returned to an empty house. The velvet ring box was missing from the dresser. A pale rectangle of dust outlined its absence. He found the box in a drawer, lid thrown open. The ring was gone.
Cynthia.
In the kitchen, Cynthia glanced up from her phone. The ghost of a smirk played on her lips.
Robert, you are back early. How was fishing?
He held up the empty box. His voice was low and tight.
Where is it? My mother's wedding ring. The one that was in this box every day for 4 years.
That old thing? I haven't seen it. Maybe you misplaced it before you left.
He saw the flicker in her eyes. She was lying. Robert stood there, the empty box in his hand. The weight of it was heavier than any ring. He walked back to the kitchen, the empty box still in his hand. Cynthia hadn't moved.
You expect me to believe it just vanished?
Maybe you lost it on your trip. You've always been distracted about that thing.
My mother wore that band for 46 years. Inside it says, "To Dorothy, all my days. Edward, 1953.
It's just a ring, Robert. Your mother has been dead for 6 years.
In his mind, he saw his mother's hands dusted with flour, the ring catching kitchen light. That ring was a promise kept through cancer, through the empty chair at the dinner table.
You never understood what that ring stood for.
What it stands for is you loving a memory more than you've ever loved me.
He saw it then. The resentment that had been hardening for years, finally laid bare. Robert turned away and walked out of the kitchen. He needed air, needed to think. The memory of that last morning replayed. He had checked the box before the trip. It was there, right where it always was. By the time he pulled out of the driveway, Cynthia was already on the phone. She dialed a number the moment his truck disappeared from view.
I'll have the cash by Friday. Don't worry, girls. Vegas is happening.
Robert hadn't heard that call, but now the pieces clicked into place.
She sold it. She sold my mother's ring for a weekend in Vegas.
He couldn't prove it, not yet, but the hollow in his chest was proof enough. That evening, he packed a bag and drove to his brother Mark's house. He needed space to think clearly. Cynthia could have the empty house for one more night. 3 days earlier, Cynthia pulled open the door of Corrigan's Pawn and Appraisals. A small bell rang out sharp and intrusive. Frank Corrigan, the elderly owner, looked up from a pocket watch he was repairing. A jeweler's glass hung from his vest.
I need $200 for this ring. Please.
She pushed the gold band across the counter. Frank lifted it, turning it over in his weathered hands.
Let me see it under the light.
It's just an old piece, but it's real gold. I swear it.
Frank nodded slowly. He counted out 10 $20 bills and slid them toward her. She grabbed the cash, signed a slip with a shaking hand, and hurried out without a backward glance. Left alone, Frank carried the ring to his bench lamp. He tilted the band until the engraving caught the light.
Dorothy. This was Dorothy Thompson's ring. I resized this band for her in 1991.
Frank placed the ring carefully on a velvet pad and walked to his cramped back office. He pulled a leather ledger from the shelf, its pages yellowed with age, and opened to 1991.
August 14th, 1991. Dorothy Thompson. Ring resizing. She paid me in tea cakes in gratitude.
He remembered her clearly, a kind woman with a tight embrace, the ring always a size too big.
I can't sell this ring. It's not mine to keep.
He turned on his computer, a bulky monitor that hummed to life, and began searching public records. He typed in the name Dorothy had so often mentioned. Robert Thompson, Robert Thompson.
427 Maple Lane. That's where this ring belongs.
He hit print. The old machine shuddered and pushed out a single sheet of paper. He set the page beside the ring on his desk. The right thing had never been clearer. Robert returned home the next morning. Cynthia's car was gone. The house sat silent under a gray sky. He walked into the kitchen and found a note propped against the coffee maker. Gone for the weekend with the girls. Don't worry about the ring. I'm sure it'll turn up.
She wrote that, as if it were a lost set of keys.
He went to the bedroom and pulled open her nightstand drawer. There, tucked beneath old receipts, was the slip from Corrigan's Pawn and Appraisals. 1 gold wedding band, $200.
$200. That's all my mother's promise was worth to her.
His hands trembled so hard the paper rattled. He stared at the name on the receipt. Corrigan's. Now he knew where to go. Robert drove straight to Corrigan's. The receipt crumpled in his grip, but the shop was dark. A hand-lettered closed sign taped to the door. He banged his fist against the glass, shouting. No lights flickered. No one came. Inside, Frank had a small velvet box and a letter laid out on his desk.
Dorothy would want this ring returned to her boy. No questions, no payment.
He slipped the box into a padded envelope, then the letter on top.
I won't profit from a widow's memory. This ring carries too much love.
Outside, Robert stopped pounding. He pressed his forehead to the cold glass, then walked away. He drove home in silence, the empty velvet box open on the passenger seat beside him. That evening, Frank sealed the envelope and dropped it in the mail slot at the corner box. 2 days later, Robert walked to the mailbox in a daze. The house had been too quiet. Inside was a padded envelope with no return address. His name was written in a careful, unfamiliar hand. He carried it to the kitchen and sat down, turning the envelope over several times. He tore it open. A small velvet box fell into his palm. Inside the box, nestled on faded satin, was his mother's ring, and beneath it, a folded letter. Dear Mr. Thompson, I recognized the inscription. This ring was sold to me by a woman named Cynthia Thompson for $200. I appraised this ring for your mother Dorothy in 1991. She loved you more than anything in this world. Please accept it back. No payment. He read those words 3 times. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. He lifted the ring to the light. The inscription was still there, unchanged.
She sold it for a weekend. My mother's ring. She sold it and lied to my face.
He unfolded the letter further and read one more line, the one that severed the last thread. She returned later that day and offered to buy the ring back for $300. I refused her.
She tried to buy it back just to resell it elsewhere. There is no bottom.
He stood, walked to the bedroom, and placed the ring back in the box on the dresser, where it belonged. His hands were steady now. The grief had hardened into something unbreakable. He picked up his phone and dialed his brother Mark's number.
She sold Mom's ring, Mark. For $200. I am done.
After a heavy pause, he ended the call and dialed Harold Pierce, attorney at law. When the receptionist connected him, Robert's voice was flat and final.
I need to file for divorce. Grounds of dissipation and emotional cruelty. I want it started today.
The next morning, Robert walked into Harold Pierce's office. He laid the pawn receipt, Frank's letter, and the velvet box on the desk. Pierce studied the evidence. His face remained unreadable, but his pen was already in motion. Pierce leaned forward. Under state law, this is dissipation of marital assets. We can file an emergency motion for exclusive use of the house. Robert took the pen and signed the petition without hesitation. The pages rustled and were stacked. The divorce was set in motion. Then he stepped into the hallway and called his accountant.
Freeze the joint account. Remove her from the credit cards. She gets nothing.
The accountant confirmed it would be done within the hour. Robert ended the call and walked to his truck. He drove to the bank and closed the joint checking account in person, transferring the balance to a sole proprietor account. Back at the house, he set the velvet box on the kitchen table and looked at his phone. No messages. Then a notification flashed. A $200 ATM withdrawal at the Bellagio. She was still spending. He smiled coldly. Robert returned home and began packing Cynthia's belongings with cold, mechanical precision. Each item was proof of a marriage that had been a lie. He deleted her fingerprint from the security system. Then he unscrewed the front door lock and installed a new one, testing the deadbolt twice. The master closet was bare. Only a forgotten blouse lay crumpled on the floor beneath the empty hangers. He sat at the kitchen table and called the credit card companies, canceling each card in her name with a voice that left no room for argument. The house was his now. He stood in the doorway and said it aloud, the words sinking into the silent rooms.
This is my house now. She has no place here.
At the same moment, Cynthia was at a blackjack table in the Bellagio, laughing as the dealer busted. She raked in a stack of chips, her friends cheering around her.
I told you girls, this trip is blessed. Everything is going my way.
Robert locked the front door and set the alarm. Cynthia's key would not work when she returned. A familiar truck pulled into the driveway. Robert's brother stepped out, face drawn with concern. Robert handed him the letter and the ring. He read, face turning from confusion to shock. He pressed his palm on the table. His jaw tightened. He just nodded.
She sold my mother's vows for a weekend of cocktails. There's no coming back.
His brother didn't leave. He helped tape the last box shut. They stacked her boxes in the garage like unwanted furniture. Afterward, he put a hand on Robert's shoulder.
She desecrated my mother's memory. I will not let her desecrate this house.
His brother didn't say much. He stayed until the coffee went cold. That night, the velvet box sat on the kitchen counter. The silence felt less empty now. 3 weeks later, Cynthia's flight landed. She texted Robert from the rental car, still buzzing from the trip.
On my way home. Can't wait to see you.
Robert read the message. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he set the phone face down. The velvet box was already on the coffee table. He hadn't moved it in weeks. He called the process server. She's 10 minutes out. You know where to wait. He placed the ring box at the center of the table, like a centerpiece. Then he dimmed the lights, leaving only the porch lamp on. Outside, the street was silent. The server's car was parked discreetly around the corner. Headlights swung into the driveway. The rental sedan came to a stop. Through the blinds, Robert watched her step out, still smiling. Cynthia walked toward the front door, tugging her suitcase, still glowing from the trip. She slid the key in and twisted. It jammed. She pulled it out, checked the teeth, and tried again.
Robert, the lock isn't working.
She pounded on the door with the flat of her hand. The house stayed dark. Inside, Robert stood motionless, arms folded. He didn't flinch. She pulled out her phone and dialed his number. It rang. Once. Then, voicemail. She circled the house, crouched at the side window, and cupped her hands to see inside. The dresser was bare, save for her old velvet box. Her side of the closet stood open and empty. Her face went slack. The key slipped from her fingers and clinked against the concrete. Robert watched her through the slats. He didn't smile. He simply waited. From the shadow of the garage, a man in a gray suit stepped forward, a thick envelope in his hand. He extended the envelope toward Cynthia, who stood frozen against the locked door. She took it, her brow furrowed, hands trembling. Inside, Robert watched through the slats of the blinds. She tore the envelope open and read the first line. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Her eyes scanned the page, lips moving, as she read the detailed grounds. The petition cited dissipation of marital assets, including the sale of a family heirloom ring without consent. Cynthia looked up at the window. Robert's silhouette stood behind the glass, unmoving. She pounded the glass with her fist, screaming his name. The process server walked back to his car, leaving her alone in the driveway with the scattered papers. Cynthia collapsed onto the hood of the rental car, her body racked with sobs. The divorce papers scattered on the concrete. The front door swung open. Robert stepped onto the porch, the letter from Frank gripped in his hand. He unfolded the letter and read a passage aloud, each word deliberate and cold. She sold your mother's ring for $200 to fund a weekend trip to Las Vegas. Cynthia's head whipped toward him. She stumbled across the driveway, hands reaching out.
Robert, please. I was going to get it back. I made a mistake. Just let me explain.
Stop. You sold my mother's wedding vows for a weekend in Vegas. Now leave, and don't come back.
She stood frozen in the driveway, her mouth opening and closing. Then she backed away. He stepped inside and pulled the door closed. The lock clicked with a finality that echoed. The rental car's engine started. Headlights swept the driveway, then turned onto the road and faded. Robert stood in the empty living room, the letter still in his hand. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. He walked to the bedroom and stood before the dresser. The velvet box sat exactly where he had placed it.
He opened the box. The ring caught the faint light, the inscription clear. All my days, Mom.
He pressed his thumb over the words, then closed the box and set it back on the dresser. He exhaled, a long breath that seemed to empty the room of tension. The house felt different, lighter, as if the ring had reclaimed its place and the walls had let go of the anger. He looked at the photo of his parents beside the box. The young faces smiled back, unchanged. He didn't need words anymore. The ring was home. That was enough. Weeks later, a thick envelope arrived from the courthouse. Robert sat at the kitchen table and read the final decree. The marriage was dissolved. No settlement, no alimony. Cynthia's name was erased from every line. He set the paper down and looked toward the dresser, where the velvet box rested. Then he picked up his phone.
Frank, it's Robert Thompson.
Mr. Thompson, I hope you are doing well.
I am now, because of what you did. I am sending you a check, Frank. Don't argue with me.
That's not necessary. I told you, no payment.
It's not payment. It's gratitude. For my mother. You'll take it, or I'll bring it in person.
He hung up and wrote a check for $20,000. In the memo line, he wrote, "For Dorothy." The envelope arrived at Corrigan's on a Tuesday. Frank opened it with his usual care, then stopped cold. $20,000. In the memo line, 3 words, "For Dorothy." He tried to call Robert. The phone rang 6 times and went to voicemail.
Robert, this is too much. Please, I can't accept this.
But the call went unanswered, as if Robert had known he would refuse. Frank set the phone down. He looked at the check again, then at the faded photo of Dorothy on the corkboard. He unpinned it and placed the check there instead. A week later, a handwritten note arrived with no return address. Inside, in elegant script, "Dinner, my treat for the rest of my life."
He's a good man.
In a cramped studio apartment across town, Cynthia sat alone. The walls were bare. Her reflection stared back from a cracked mirror. There were no friends calling, no weekend trips, only the quiet consequence of a choice she could never take back. 1 year to the day since the divorce became final, Robert and Frank sat in their usual booth at the Red Chimney.
Robert raised his glass, the candlelight catching the lines on his face. To the man who returned more than a ring, you brought back my mother's dignity.
Frank's hand rested on the check he'd never cashed, still pinned on his corkboard. You are impossible.
Their laughter filled the small restaurant, a sound Robert hadn't made in years. Later, they walked along the river, the water moving slow and patient. That evening, Robert stood at his dresser and lifted the velvet lid.
All my days.
The engraving had not faded. It seemed brighter now, as if polished by time. Some things, once returned, cannot be lost again. He closed the box and looked at the photograph of his parents. The smile that came was real. Morning. Light fell across the dresser, the velvet box resting in its quiet spot. Robert made coffee and stood at the window, watching the cardinals on the feeder. He no longer checked his phone with dread. The silence in the house had become his own. At the shop, Frank polished the glass case, humming an old tune Dorothy once whistled. The check was still on the corkboard, behind a new note. "See you Thursday, old friend." The ring had traveled from 1953 through love and loss, theft and return. Now it simply waited. Snow fell softly outside Frank's shop as he turned the sign to closed. The ring sat in its box, a circle unbroken, holding a promise that outlasted everything. Robert touched the photograph again. "We're still here, Mom, all my days." And in the quiet room, the ring answered with its own patient light. The days after were quieter, but never empty. Robert planted tulips where the weeds had been. The ring on his dresser became a compass, pointing him toward gratitude rather than grief. Frank hung the check near the door, beneath a tiny plaque. "Integrity is its own reward." They shared meals and long silences, 2 old men who had learned that friendship can be born from a single act of honor. 70 years of vows sat in that box. It had outlasted the woman who wore it, the son who treasured it and the betrayal that tried to erase it. In the evening, when the sun hit the dresser just right, the inscription glowed softly against the satin. Robert would pause, press his thumb to the lid, and let the memory settle over him.
Not the loss, not the anger, just a love that never wavered.
All his days, and beyond, the ring kept its promise in the quiet, patient way of things that endure. And in the stillness, the light held